Hi, it's me. Number 4. Motorcycles. The most well-known shipwreck in the Red Sea, the SS Thistlegorm, has a long and winding history. It was first built in Maryport, England in 1940. At 418 feet, it was classified as a standard type C1 cargo ship, which means it had a single deck and was not designed to be particularly fast. Instead, it was meant to haul heavy goods across the sea at a steady pace. The ship was owned by the Blue Funnel Line Shipping Company based in Liverpool and was named after the thistle flower, a symbol of Scotland. When the ship was completed, it was immediately pressed into service and became part of the critical World War II effort. For much of the war, the British relied on convoys of cargo ships like the Thistlegorm to transport essential supplies to the besieged island nation of Malta. Because the island was under constant attack from the Axis powers, resupplying it by sea was dangerous work, and several convoys were sunk before reaching their destination. However, the Thistlegorm managed to complete its runs without incident, helping the island hold out against German and Italian forces until Allied victory. After the war, the Thistlegorm continued to be used as a cargo ship until 1960, and it was deemed too costly to maintain and was scheduled for scrapping. But before it could be broken up, fate intervened once again. September 2, 1960, the ship left Kuwait for Suez, Egypt, carrying 279 passengers and a load of vehicles. The next day, it ran aground on a sandbar and began to leak fuel. After being refloated, it was towed to a harbor in Egypt, where repairs could be made. It would have to remain docked while an investigation took place. As the ship sat idle in the shallow water, it became a target for local divers who looted the vessel. Then a storm hit. Though the Thistlegorm was sturdy, it wasn't anchored properly and wound up drifting out to sea, ultimately running aground on a reef. When the tide went out, it was discovered that the ship had split in two and was leaking fuel into the water. An effort was made to tow it back to the original dock, but after hitting another reef, the salvage operation was abandoned and the wreck was left to rest in its watery grave. Now, more than 8 decades later, it still sits on the seabed off the coast of Egypt, just waiting to be explored. It is now considered one of the top dive sites in the world, drawing thousands of tourists each year to explore its mysterious depths. The wreck itself is mostly intact, resting in 2 pieces connected by its broken spine. The bow lies about 131 feet beneath the surface, and the stern is a little deeper at 164 feet. While the deepest parts of the wreck aren't open to recreational scuba divers, there's still plenty to see for those with an interest in history and shipwrecks. For starters, you might spot some of the vehicles that were being transported on the ship when it sank. There are 187 lorries or trucks that are mostly completely intact. In fact, because they've spent so long underwater, they're covered with coral and sponges and are home to many different kinds of fish. You can also check out the 55 motorcycles from the 1950s that are piled up near the stern of the ship. They are believed to be Triumph motorcycles from the Birmingham Small Arms Company that were headed to the British Army base in Egypt. And finally, you can check out 64 tons of ammunition that were being transported on the ship, though we recommend staying far away from these if you want to make it out of the dive alive. Before we move on, we want to thank you for your support. Please don't forget to support us. It really helps our channel. 3. History. As we mentioned earlier, the Thistlegorm was carrying 187 trucks or lorries when it sank. These were all Bedford OM lorries, a large truck produced by the British motor company Bedford Motors Limited between 1940 and 1953. During World War II, they were used extensively by the British Army as they were capable of carrying heavy loads through rough terrain. After the war, the company continued to produce the model, and it became popular for use in colonial territories, especially in Africa and Asia. But what were these lorries doing in Egypt? Well, it's likely that they were destined for the Suez Canal, where they would be used to help unload cargo ships bringing goods from Europe and Asia. With the canal only being around 100 miles long, it didn't take long to traverse it, making it easy to move goods from one side to the other. However, at the time, the Egyptians were dissatisfied with how much they were getting paid to allow the ships to pass through. Negotiations were underway to raise the tolls when the national president, Nasser, decided to nationalize the canal in July 1956. This act was seen as an unfriendly gesture towards the West and led to the Suez Crisis, a period of tension between Egypt and Britain, France, and Israel. When Israeli forces invaded the Sinai in October, French and British paratroopers were sent in to occupy the Suez Canal zone. Things seemed to be going well at first, and it appeared that the Egyptian army was easily defeated. However, it quickly became clear that the situation was more complicated than first thought. The Egyptians were able to hold off the British and French for several days, inflicting heavy casualties. Eventually, the UN brokered a ceasefire and ordered the foreign troops to withdraw. Though the conflict was short, lasting only 81 days, it was extremely significant. It marked the end of British dominance in Egypt and led to the creation of the modern state of Israel. Meanwhile, the Thistlegorm was never recovered, becoming a tomb for anyone who remained on board when it sank. But it also served as a reminder of the turbulent history of the region. Today, the wreck is protected by Egyptian law, and divers are only allowed to visit with special permission. But it is still possible to see the lorries and other cargo that the ship was carrying. These remnants of the past are a reminder of the turbulent history of the region and the men and women who lived through it. Number 2. Shipwreck. One of the most interesting aspects of the Thistlegorm is the way it sank. It was a victim of bad luck rather than enemy action, which is rare for a ship of its size. Most cargo ships during the war were sunk by German U-boats or Japanese aircraft. But the Thistlegorm managed to stay afloat for nearly 20 years. Despite traveling through some of the most dangerous waters in the world, however, the ship's demise was not without its own dramatic flair. It ran aground on a sandbar just one day after leaving Kuwait, forcing it to stop in the Egyptian port of Port Sudan for repairs. Though the ship was eventually cleared to continue on to Suez, it was already leaking fuel. This caused problems for the crew as they had to pump fuel from the damaged tanks into the remaining intact ones. On September 27th, while the ship was sailing north, the captain noticed that the fuel pumps had stopped working, and he ordered the engine room to be shut down. With no power, the crew was forced to hand pump fuel from the rear of the ship to the front, which was extremely labor-intensive. Ultimately, the effort proved to be too great, and the ship lost power as it approached the Suez Canal. Unable to control the ship, the crew dropped anchor and waited for a tugboat to come and save them. But when the tugboat arrived, it was too late. The Thistlegorm had drifted dangerously off course and wound up smashing into a reef. The impact tore a massive hole in its hull, causing it to break in two. As the ship began to sink, everyone on board abandoned it except for the 4 crew members, who stayed behind to operate the pumps and try to keep the ship afloat. Sadly, none of them survived. Number 1. Dive site. For divers, few places are as exciting as a shipwreck. The chance to explore something that has been mostly untouched for decades is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That S, no surprise that the Thistlegorm is considered one of the best dive sites in the world. There are 2 main sections to explore. First is the upper deck, which is accessible to beginner divers. Here you can swim through the wheelhouse and see the ship's wheel and other artifacts from its final voyage. You can also check out the cargo hold, which is filled with trucks and motorcycles. The second section is the lower deck, which is only accessible to experienced divers. Here you can explore the engine room and see the ship's boilers and other machinery. You can also check out the ship's hospital, which is filled with medical equipment and supplies. And if you're lucky, you might even see a green turtle or a white-tip reef shark. No matter your experience level, there's no doubt that you'll be impressed by what you see at the Thistlegorm. Just be sure to bring a good camera. You won't want to miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite thing about the Thistlegorm? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots of other videos coming up that you're not going to want to miss. See you next time.